All right, welcome to part 2 of the Tiger Force MOBAT series. When I left you off there, we were practicing drawing our shark mouths. And what I've done is I've taken my original and I've changed the design a bit. So now we're getting ready to take our design and apply it to the masking tape. This is painter's tape. It comes in multiple widths. I would recommend getting a few different widths. This super wide stuff is fantastic for things exactly like this. And the thinner stuff is good for getting into little nooks and crannies and whatnot. So what I've done is I'm going to orient you to the new drawing. So this is the outline of this piece of paper is the shape of the armored skirt on the MOBAT. And I've sketched in my shark mouth. And then this dotted line here is for when I cut out the shark mouth itself. Now I'll know where I'm going to place it because I designed it to end in the corner up there, and then when that's flat with the bottom, I'll know that we're oriented properly. So all I have to do now is cut out this negative space in here between the teeth, and I can place that down. Now I know we talked about drawing in the tongue and everything on the design, but that's something we can do afterwards and we don't have to protect it. And you have a choice here. You can do this in a couple of different ways. Just to show you, I already drew the outline on the masking tape and I put an R so it's the right side in case I get lost. So what will happen is I can cut this out, trace it onto this tape, and then just make one mask. And then when I paint the rest of the tiger colors on there, the brown and the yellow, the white will be completely masked off anyway, including this, so I don't have to protect it. Or I can make two of this design, one that has the shark mouth on it, and one that's just flat like this to completely protect the mouth. Either way is fine. And what I like to do is just have the teeth protected on there and then have the whole nose covered over. So basically I draw or I paint in the mouth colors at the very end of the project. That way if something does go wrong, I'm only repairing the white and not every single color that I put in here. So I'm just going to do a quick pause while I cut this out because that's going to be super boring to watch and you'll see what I mean. Here's the next stage. What I've done is I've gone ahead and cut out one of the shark mouths already. So this is for the right side. And what I'm doing here is I'm just setting up my second template. I'm still debating on whether or not I want to cut it out in a way that includes the side armor skirt. I don't think it's necessary given the way I've designed it. However, it may be beneficial. Just a point to note when you're doing this is that you can use scissors to cut out the paper one, but you're going to use your X-Acto knife to cut out this on the tape itself. And then when you remove this tape from the whatever board you're cutting it on, go very carefully. If it breaks, don't worry. It's happened to me before. All you have to do is put it back together and put another piece of tape over top of it. So I'm going to carry on with preparing the second one, and then I'll show you how we put them on the vehicle itself and how we protect it for what's to come next. So just hang on. All right, so now we have the template set up for the other side. It's lined up the way I want it. In this case, I've been using a pen. It's a gel pen, so the ink comes out rather nicely. Normally I use a Sharpie, but during this series, I've actually been packing my stuff up to move. So it's the perfect time to do a bare bones, minimal tool custom to show you that it can be done and to remind me of all the basics. So I've switched to a pencil here. I mean, this is a Staedtler pencil. Any pencil will do because like the marker, the pencil will work no matter what you do with it. They'll even write in the rain. So all I'm doing is I'm tracing the outline first, and you'll see that I'll put my finger down just to hold the stencil in place. We want this to be as smooth as possible. The outside edges don't matter so much, but it's the teeth we want to keep as true to the original as possible. And I'm not stressing at this point for any of it because I'm just not. Just trace over the lines.
nice and slowly. You can even sketch them a bit if you want, because when you cut this out with your X-Acto knife, your brain will tend to split the difference of any inconsistencies and give you a straight line. I don't know if that's based in science, but it is what it is. I'm just going to move my finger to the bottom one here. And if you find that it's constantly moving on you, just release your finger and reapply pressure. Yeah, just like my cat says. And we'll just keep tracing along like that. So now what we've done is we've traced the outline of the stencil onto the tape, which will become the actual mask. This is flipped over from the original. You can see, or in this case, barely see, the lines I drew in here because the paper's turned over. So all I did was basically, we're doing a mirror image in this case here. So now what I can do is I'm going to save this, just like I saved the mouth from my tiger wolf. Because you never know when you need a good shark mouth. So we'll remove the tape there, and we'll look at what we've got. So just like the first one, let me readjust the camera here. So you can see this angle right here will match this angle right here. And when we're placing these, we're still going to use some care to make sure, and we can do some fine tuning and adjusting. Because the fact of the matter is that when you work with tape this thin, you're going to get some twisting and stuff. It's kind of like, remember when we used to put posters up on our wall as a kid? You wouldn't get it just right, and there'd be that little wave in it and whatever, and then it would just get worse over time. It's the same thing. So when we're working with the masking tape, we want to remember to just be patient, as with everything else that we're doing here. And we can do some micro adjustments and whatnot. So for example, now I'm just going to sketch the back of this mouth here to finish it off. There we go. And we'll have symmetrical mouths. So now all I'm going to do is take my X-Acto knife and trace around it. See if I can get a better angle for you here. And that's all I'm doing. So this is the outside of the hull, right? This is the bottom part, so we know we're oriented correctly. And this line in the back here is that first gap in the armor on the side skirts. And all we're going to do is start from here and cut in. And what I like about doing this is it's pretty difficult to lose track of where you are, which makes for easy reparations. Now, when we do this, there will be some imperfections, and that's fine. It's to be expected. This will get you as close as you can to having symmetrical stickers. And you can actually change the shape of things with paint. So if one of your teeth wasn't as triangle-y as you wanted it to be, you can use the black, the red, and the white to readjust the image. Now, keep in mind that when you do this, red and black are very hard to cover up with white. So I can't stress enough to take your time. And it's kind of like that measure twice, cut once. It's the same thing with this, is think twice, paint once. And that'll really help you go a lot farther in your work. And the problem is, too, is that we're going to look at applying paint as thinly as possible and building up in layers. But there's still a quality about spray paint and, by extension, airbrushing paint that will make that a little difficult at times. It's just the texture of the paint after it's done. And there's honestly not a whole heck of a lot you can do about it. There are some wonderful videos out there of model builders who have been able to hand brush an airplane and make it look like it was done with an airbrush. That blows my mind because I find there to be quite a significant difference between the two. And I've just brought my knife over here to finish off cutting that off. And the other thing I'm going to do is take this line here and we're not too worried about where this goes, except at the back corner here. Because where it goes on the tank, most of this will be in the white nose section. and only a little bit of it will be in the brown section. When we're doing this, we've started off talking about using hardware store spray paint. If you're watching this and this is something you want to get serious about, I would make the recommendation to jump over to Tamiya, and there's another product out there, which you may or may not have heard of. I'm used to using Tamiya myself, but the company Vallejo, Vallejo, made brush paints, airbrush paints, and now they're getting into aerosols as well. Their paint quality is fantastic in the first two mediums. I haven't tried the spray paint yet, so I can only make the critical assumption that their spray paint is also equally high quality. So if you can see that, it's Vallejo, and it's acrylic as well. I would suggest taking a look at their spray paints and maybe giving that a whirl. That'll ease your color matching. So when you have a mistake, you don't have to spray bomb it with Vallejo spray paint. You can touch it up with Vallejo bottle paint. So now what I've done is I've cut out the whole design, hopefully correctly. We're about to have our little litmus test here. Of course, if this goes wrong, it's going to go wrong now because everybody's watching, but that's okay. So the first thing we're going to do is lift up the tape with the, and I put the L down there again. It may seem redundant, but it just helps me keep track, because it's one thing for me to do this on my own. I can make as many mistakes as I want, but I think people are counting on me to get this right the first time. So now I've peeled away the outer edge of the tape. We're not going to throw this away. It may seem overly frugal, but I don't like wasting masking tape because you're going to go through a lot of it on projects like this. So I don't see a point in, even the little small scraps can be used for something useful. So there we go. We've pulled away the tape there. I'm being attacked by the stencil up here, so that's good. And now we're going to do the same thing. Now we're going to peel away the inside of the stencil. So just a gentle lift. And if you find that the design's coming up with it, that's fine. Just like they said in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? Don't panic. Just recut and gently lift. Now this one should come up in almost like this Charlie Brown pattern, that little zigzag. Okay, and if you find that your knife is getting dull, that's another thing that you'll tend to go through a lot of the more you get into this, is knife blades. And of course, this is a little weird for me doing this behind the camera, so my angle's a little weird. And all I'm doing here is reinforcing the cuts, or recutting them as I go. Because in some cases, maybe it didn't go through the tape, or there's a few fibers hanging on, and that's fine. And if you want to, you can do what I'm about to do here. You don't have to pull up the whole thing in one go. So just cut it off. It's like scrap material. You can save it to plug a hole somewhere else when you're masking. It's no problem. There we go. And it comes up. Hopefully with a minimum of trouble. Fortunately, I can't sing for you right now. My brain can only do 3 things at once, and this is like doing 4 things at once. So there we go. I know this may seem tedious, and sometimes it is. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, but the end results are worth it. And that's not to say that if you don't have access to someone who's maybe you're a Photoshop guru, you can design your own stickers and have someone print them for you. By all means. This is just to show you that if you don't have access to those tools, that you can do it yourself. And that's the big thing, right? Is not, it is a matter of skill in some regards, but to demystify this process so that when you see something like Tiger Force, after this, hopefully you'll think, hey, I can do that. Because that's the whole goal of this, is to show you that you can indeed do it. And we're getting off the last little bit of masking here. I apologize for blocking it, but you get the idea, right? It's just cut, recut, pull gently, and you can knock down some of the length of tape. So, for example, on the first one I did, it's just starting to rip now, but I got it all out in one shot. So there's the inner mouth, the negative space, but it's certainly not a requirement. More like a catching a fly with chopsticks sort of moment. And we'll just nip that off there and there. And now we have two mouths that are good to go. Now, one thing I noticed I did here was a little different. So I'm going to employ a little bit of wizardry here, and I'm going to eyeball it. I know that's really dangerous, but it's also very fun. And the reason why I'm doing this here is that the outside of this has to be symmetrical. At least as symmetrical as we can be, right? And don't forget that if we make some mistakes with the spray paint, we can touch it up with brush paint. That's why I chose flat white for the nose of this vehicle. Now, if you wanted to take it to the next level, you could spray the initial color as being an off-white, and then spray flat white over top. And what that'll look like is it'll make it look like the decal is partially translucent. I know that sounds crazy, but if you just think about it for a few minutes, it'll make sense. And then it'll put you on a level that's just, well, next level, let's call it. And I'm just going to address this a little more. I think right there is good. Yep, that took a little bit off. That's all right. We'll dress that up with tape later. All right, happy little accidents. Okay. And there you have it. Your two equal and opposite mouths. And we'll tidy this up a bit. There's a bit of a square tip right there, which we can just go like this. Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave that because I like the back line of it. It's still straight, just like this one. So I'm going to touch that up with paint later. And that's all part of it, right? Even with doing this masking process, we're going to be very careful in doing this. I know it sounds like a lot, and it may seem like it. But once you break the process down, it's not that difficult. So what you want to do to sum this one up is figure out where you're going to put your shark mouth, put some paper on it, sketch it out, finalize that drawing, and then transfer it to the tape. Cut it out, and you should have this as a final result. Now, if you give me 2 seconds here, I'm just going to reset my table here so I can show you how I put it onto the MoBat itself. So just stand by. Okay, here we go. So I think we've all come to know and love this shape or hate it, depending on your point of view. And this is what we're going to apply the masks to. So now, very carefully, I'm just going to set this aside because I need 2 hands to pull this thing up. It may seem like I'm being overly delicate. Could you use your thumb and your finger? Sure. This is just a much more controlled way to do it. And we're just going to go nice and slow. Almost like you're just letting the tension on the tape do the work for you. And depending on the edge of your mask, it will be more or less of a pain to do this. In the case of the MoBat, I had to choose a design where the mouth looked like it was relatively true to the original design, and put it somewhere that actually wasn't very large. And if you look at the different Tiger Force vehicles, you see all the mouths are different, which actually buys us some artistic license to come up with our own solutions. So, let's see if we're in frame here, and mostly. So we remember our initial landmark, which was the front and the top edge of the skirt armor here. And I'm just being very light, because I want to get it where I want to get it. This is the greatest time killer here. I don't want to speed this up, just so you can, one, I don't know how, to be honest with you, and two, I want you to see the time and effort that goes into doing this, and I promise you that it's worth it. So there's our initial lineup there. I'm just very gently manipulating this because it's tape, so it's going to stick to everything, right? We know this. There we go. Come on. I find sometimes it helps talking to it as well, especially if people are watching. Because who doesn't like having things a little awkward? So there we go. And now I'm just going to make sure it's nice and flat. So this mask is going to serve two purposes. Yeah, see, it's gotten away from me a little bit there. So we'll just pull out, push it down. And I think that's good right there. Let's see what happens here. Watch this thing make me a liar. Are you going to? Oh, you're going to try to. Yep, so there's some initial placement right there. And there's your shark mouth. Now, because we're not going to be, all I'm doing is burnishing it down. What that means is just rubbing it down onto them, making it as flush as I can with the painted white surface. And that's why we're using painter's tape, is that it's far more forgiving. And you can see there, those two teeth are now touching, and that's gonna happen. So, what I'm gonna do is move this bottom tooth a bit. Really going to force it down onto its bottom line. There we go. So now it's given a little bit of separation there. And artistically, if you don't like that, what you can just do is, with the black and the red paint that we're going to put in there, just alter the angle ever so slightly. And the good thing is, is that while these will have minor imperfections in them, they will be so close that when you turn it side to side to look at the other side, it won't even be noticeable. So we know now that we've landmarked the top of corner of our mouth to the top of the plate there. We've got our front landmark here, and this tooth down here is sitting mostly flush with the bottom, and it'll be close to that tooth there. So now I'm just going to put that on the other side, and we'll be right back. And here we are with the final result. So we have the shark mouth applied to the left side, and to the right. And we'll be able to go in there and touch it up afterwards if there's any glaring differences, but I can assure you that as long as you take your time with it and act conservatively, that you will have a undiscernible difference between the two. So for all intents and purposes, it will be exactly the same. This surface in and of itself is a little unique in shape to try and get something in there, and of course it's very thin, so trying to get a good sized shark mouth on there can be a challenge. And when we applied the flat white here, we went further than we wanted to, so when we apply the brown's actually going to come to right about there, if not a little bit further forward. So that's why we made the mask here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover over this with little pieces of tape just to preserve the shark mouth. At this phase we could paint the black in and the red in, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to try something different, and I'm going to do that part last. So I'm just going to cover this up with tape on top of this, and then we'll be ready to apply the brown color, but of course not before we do the yellow everywhere else. So join me for the next video when I show you the best practices for getting paint in all of these little greeblies and grills and fan blades and everything else. It's easier than it sounds, and the reason why we're doing the yellow next is because we're going to apply some soft masks, and we're going to get that brown color to hopefully feather in on the brown side and on the yellow side. So until next time, take your time, be patient, and above all else, have fun.